Welcome to the Note Nuggets podcast, where you can learn how to become the bank, build wealth, and accumulate streams of income perfect for your savings or IRAs. You'll hear from industry experts, seasoned veterans, and everyday investors. Our goal is to teach you how to invest in notes, one nugget of knowledge at a time. Here's your host, Kevin Galang.
Welcome, everyone, to another episode of the Note Nuggets podcast, where you learn how to turn others' debt into income for your savings or IRA. As a note investor, you are protected by the property the borrower owns. That's why it's important to make sure that the property value gives you enough equity where, at the very least, you could recoup your money. Ideally, there should be enough equity so that if you took the property back and ended up selling it as is, you would make a profit. But even before assessing the property value, say through Zillow, Realtor.com, Google Maps, or a local realtor, the numbers of the note need to make sense first. The numbers should give you an indication of whether or not the note is worth buying. If the numbers make sense, then assess the property using whatever resources you have. It would not be recommended to simply use the numbers of the property alone to determine whether or not a note is worth buying for your portfolio, which is why this week's Note Nugget is about how to look at both the property and the numbers as part of your due diligence. By the way, if you like what you hear on the Note Nuggets podcast, please leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. It will help increase the reach of the show to other like-minded listeners like you. For step-by-step instructions on how to leave a review on your phone or your computer, head over to notenuggets.com/review. Now, before we dive into this week's episode, let's learn about our guest. Justin Bogard is a real estate investor who architects deals from the viewpoint of being the bank. He has co-authored a #1 bestseller real estate book and co-hosts the Two Wealth Show, which is a video and podcast about real estate investing. So when it comes to your experience as a previous house flipper, and there is such an emphasis on the collateral when you're doing note investing, what are some signs that you look for at a property before you buy the note?
Well, I'm typically looking at the note before I even look at the property. So I'm truthfully, and it doesn't matter which way you do this. If you look at the property first and the note second, or if you look at the note first and the property second, it doesn't matter. It's just my preference is look at the numbers first. And if it makes sense to me, then I know the collateral is probably going to be pretty good. Otherwise, why would the numbers be that good? And so that's kind of my take on it. So I look at the numbers first before I look at the property. And when I look at the property, it's just like you're investing in something. You kind of look at it and be like, how well are they taking care of it? Do they show pride of ownership? What it looks on the outside, Kevin, is probably what it looks like on the inside, right? So you can tell a lot by the outside of a house.
Very much so. And I use, because we can't go inside generally speaking, I'll use Google Maps and see what the rest of the neighborhood looks like. Because to your point, if the security looks good enough to make a purchase, we should. But if the entire neighborhood isn't somewhere where I would particularly want to invest in, why would I kind of move forward in the event I had to take it back, right? That potentially scares me.
Yeah.
And when we're talking about these numbers, I know that in flipping, you have the ARV is an important number. What are some of the numbers that you look at when it comes to note investing?
Well, probably the number one focus after considering if it's a performing or a non-performing loan, because you're looking at that pay history, is probably what we call the investment to value ratio. So how much money am I putting into this note versus how much money that note or that collateral is actually worth? So in essence, if I'm paying $65,000 for this note, whatever the balance is, but the property is worth $110,000, I've got a lot of protection there if I had to go through foreclosure and take it back, versus paying $65,000 for something, and then it's worth today, its value is $70,000. Well, there's not a lot of movement for error right there, right? There's no margin for error. So that's probably the next most important factor for me when I'm looking at it, is that investment to value ratio, to make sure you check it off. Because the yield, honestly, a lot of people, what we call get drunk on yield. They focus on the return only, but they don't understand the return is just the minimum of what you make. So if you find out your yield is 6, 7, 8, 9%, that's at full maturity, Kevin. But what happens every 7 to 9 years in the real estate business, which I love about the note business, is somebody sells their house, they refinance their loan.
Yeah.
And then that person that owns the debt gets paid off in full.
I like that. And that's another thing to consider, right? You are being the bank, you will get paid like the bank. And that's a really fantastic aspect of note investing. Due diligence is crucial as a note investor. It could make the difference between a profit and losing all of your investment. To learn more about how Justin creates monthly cash flow with notes, head over to notenuggets.com/numbers to sign up for his full interview. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you for tuning in to this week's episode of the Note Nuggets podcast. Be sure to subscribe to the show to get access to additional weekly value nuggets and get notified with episode updates. To subscribe, all you have to do is head over to subscribe.notenuggets.com. If you have any questions about this episode or note investing, book a time on Kevin's calendar at contact.notenuggets.com. We'll see you next week with another note nugget to add to your tool belt.